Hello, for those tuning into the recording, Tom and Renee here from College Essay Guy, and we are going to dive into after you've applied, deferrals, waitlists, and letters of continued interest. So, if you are a current senior who's going through the college application process, maybe you applied to some schools early, maybe you haven't, maybe you're applying, saving all your goodness for regular decision, wherever you are in the spectrum, we are here for you. And our wonderful moderator, Diana, in the background is there for any tech related questions. So a few housekeeping items. As you can see, this session is being recorded. Many people are still probably going to ask that, but there's your answer. And you're also going to see a bar on like all the slides going forward that says it over and over again. So don't worry, you will get an email of this, as well as the slides that we are going through today. You'll get an email copy of the slides. And actually, Diana's going to paste a copy of them into the chat right now as well. So that way, some of the links and things that we were going to mention, videos we wanted to play, we're not having the best audio quality today, so you'll be able to watch it in the comfort of your own home. We'll be turning off the chat feature in Zoom for this webinar just because it's easier for us to kind of have one central place to go and answer your questions. So you'll notice there's a Q&A box on your Zoom window. Use that anytime you have questions that you want to answer during the session. They don't even have to be super related to what we're talking about. We really want all of you who are tuned into this webinar today to leave with clarity around big top of mind questions that you have around your process. It may be things that we're touching on in the session, it may not be, but we're going to try to have as much time as possible towards the end to answer as many questions as we can. And when Renee and I are bouncing back and forth presenting, we'll answer questions, just rapid fire typing as much as we can when the other person is speaking. We're not going to do the live session survey just to save time, but we also did want to plug our live events calendar and webpage. So Diana will put a link in the chat to that now. But essentially, if you don't know about this feature, it actually lists out any of the live sessions that we're doing on a very beautifully organized color-coded calendar. It lets you know what audience they're primarily for, and it also has all of our recorded sessions as well in one single place. So a lot of times people don't know this is a feature that you can tap into, and I know we send a decent amount of emails, so this might be easier. You can just like download a plugin of a calendar and have all the sessions appear on your Google Calendar like you see in the video demo. So it's a really great feature. Highly recommend. So these are the big main key points that we're going to be hitting during today's session. So we're going to just walk through some practical guidance around some of the decision notifications that you may start to receive from colleges. Maybe you have already started to hear back from a few schools. What Renee is going to walk through kind of what those different decisions mean and some things that you should consider in terms of with your own process to manage that decision as appropriately as possible. And then if you do end up getting waitlisted or deferred from any schools on your college list, meaning that you're not admitted outright and you are put into further rounds down the line, you're strung further along in the college's process, I'm going to walk through a letter of continued interest, which is the most common way that students express their continued interest in attending a certain school that they weren't admitted to outright. Renee and I will also kind of just talk a little bit about some of the optional application components that are out there, such as some colleges have these short video responses that they offer to students. There's some opportunities that colleges will let you do that are available after you apply in your application portal, which Renee will talk a little bit about. But really, we know you're all coming kind of with a spectrum of your application timeline and your college list. So if you have questions about essays, about colleges, financial aid, whatever you'd like support with. Renee and I both have lots of experience in both of those areas. So really, our time is your time, and we're happy to help how we can. All right, Renee, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Okay, so I'm going to go over the types of decisions that students may get. Now, hopefully, this is the one that everybody wants, right? Everybody wants this admit slide. You want these decisions. So some of you have already been hearing, I know there's a few schools that have their ED out already. So if you applied early decision to, let's say, Boston College or Tulane, you may have already heard because those have been out. And we were just reviewing while we were waiting for you all to come in. There's many schools over the next few days into next week if a student applied early decision. Now, there are also some early action schools who will roll out decisions early. But it also may depend on where you live. For example, Georgia Tech, I believe, rolled out their early action, but it was for their in-state applicants, and so did UGA and things like that. So you're going to start hearing, and if you are admitted, congratulations, because that's what everybody wants. And in the end, you would like to have admits to all of your schools. But if you applied early decision, then you know what that means. You're committed because you signed that contract with your counselor and your parent, and you're going to need to withdraw all of your other applications. So the easiest way to do that really is to write out an email saying, thank you so much for the opportunity, but I've been admitted somewhere else and I'm going to withdraw my application. And you can just blind copy all the admissions offices, so they don't, you can just send one email, in other words. That's the best thing to do. And you also might want to follow whatever rules that your high school gives you in regards to that, because I know there are some schools where the counselor wants proof that you withdrew your applications. The school that you are admitted to early decision is going to send out instructions for you on things to do next, but there's going to be a point where you have to put down your deposit. And then from there, you'll go into all the things that everybody else is going to be doing in May, which is applying for your housing and signing up for orientation, et cetera. If you are admitted early action or regular decision or rolling, because the University of Pittsburgh is rolling and students are finding those decisions out as the semester, or I'm sorry, as the last few months have been going on, you don't have to let any of those schools know until May 1 that you were admitted. So you have plenty of time to kind of figure out where you've been admitted, and then you can compare and contrast your pros and cons for all the schools that you were admitted to before you make your decision. So congratulations to anybody who's already been admitted or will be admitted over the next few days. But you can go forward, Tom, to the next slide. So this is a very common admission decision, defer. I have talked to numerous students already that I'm working with, and even some family friends, and there's a lot of deferrals. What is a deferral? It is not a denial. So a lot of times, and actually I've had numerous students who are, I'm so disappointed I was deferred. I understand that feeling, but it's not a denial. You're still in the running. So if you're deferred, the college is basically saying, we are still interested, but we want to roll you into the regular decision pool and we want to consider you again. And they may also want some additional information. So they they usually would like to see mid-year grades. Some of the schools that you apply to automatically request mid-year grades for everybody anyway. But for some of the schools, they may specifically say to you, we would like to see some of your first semester, grades. It's an opportunity for you to possibly do a letter of continued interest, which Tom will talk about in a minute. And there may be some other things that you can do within the portal if they ask you to do that. If there's been any major changes, you've been involved in some new activities, or you've gotten some new awards, you've been selected for the All-State band or something that you just found out about after you applied, you can definitely let the colleges know about that, because they'll review again and they'll have that new information as well. So try not to get down about it, because it is a very common response for many colleges as they're kind of protecting their yield. And I don't know if maybe we should explain what yield is, right, Tom? What do you think? Yes. Okay. So what is yield? Yield is the percentage of students who have been admitted who actually accept the offer. So when colleges accept fewer students in the early rounds and then they defer a lot of students, they're kind of waiting to see, how this is all going to pan out. Maybe through their early decision, they might admit, some of them are admitting up to 50% of their class through early decision. So if you apply early action, and you look competitive, but they want to roll you into regular because they want to see who else is in that pool before they start making offers. And there could be other things like demonstrated interest and things that are factored in. But the bottom line is the college wants to protect how many seats are on campus. They want to make sure that they fill them. All right. So there's a lot of things that could go into the deferral, but I wouldn't read too much into it. Next slide, Tom. Okay, so here's just a couple of examples of deferrals and how colleges handle these. So this is about a year old, but Yale, as you look at this slide over here, over the years, you can see that their admit rate just in general has gone down, but not drastically. It was like 15% back in 2022. That was for students who are applying to, those were graduation years, I should say, in college. And then it's down to about 10% for the class of 2027. But you can see one thing that has definitely happened is that the deferral rate dropped and the rejection rate actually rose. And that was because they were receiving a lot of information from people, that were applying, basically colleagues, high school counselors, and everybody just basically saying, it would be a lot better if you just went ahead and just rejected the student if they're not going to get in. Because one of the things with deferral, it does prolong maybe the agony or the expectation or the waiting. And for students who really maybe don't have a chance to get in at all, they're just going to reject it outright. This is Yale I'm talking about, not all schools, instead of prolonging it. So they may have fewer deferrals. And if you're getting deferred from Yale, that actually might be, you might look at this slide and say, oh, well, maybe I do have a really good chance because they're not deferring that many. They're either accepting or they're denying, and then they're deferring just a few. So that's what you should read from this side for Yale. Next slide, I believe, is Pomona. And Pomona has a little blurb on their website where they talk about the fact that they defer about 10 to 15% of the early applicants. So if you are deferred from Pomona, again, they find you strong. You're a strong potential candidate for admission, but they want to roll you into regular and consider your application again, and you'll find out before April. And I think I didn't mention this earlier, that most of the students who are deferred will probably find out in the March timeframe. Maybe differences depending on school. And I think the next slide is an example of UGA's wording. And here they're saying that if you're deferred, they actually find you as an academically sound student, but they need additional information to make a final decision. So they're going to tell you what information they need, but they want, grades, standardized test scores. If you have any updated, maybe you've added a class or anything like that. So they'll give you information in the portal on what to do after you've been deferred. Okay, and I believe the last slide is, or not the last one, second to last decision is waitlisting. Over the past year or two, I believe there's been a lot of waitlisting. I don't know if Tom agrees with that, but I saw a lot of waitlisting this last cycle, not this one, but the one before. And I also saw a lot of students get in off the wait list. So waitlisting, in my opinion, or what I like to describe it, is kind of like an insurance policy for the college. So they may waitlist a lot of students, thousands of students. And in the past, they may have admitted 0. They may have admitted 15. But this past year, there was a lot of waitlist movement, and the movement on the waitlist actually went very late into the summer. So it started kind of early. A lot of times it doesn't start until after May 1. And this slide here explains that if you're waitlisted, you're kind of not still in the running. You're not denied necessarily, but you're not accepted. And you need to go ahead and put a deposit down at another school before May 1. Now, if you find out after May 1 that you've been accepted on the wait list, and you also have to let the college know if you want to accept the offer of waitlisting, and there's going to be, again, information on the portal, and Tom will talk to you about the letter of continued interest. But normally you're going to find out after May 1. And why is that? Because after May 1, colleges are going to know who's actually committed to come. And if they have space available, then they're going to go to their wait list. And this past year, schools were going to their wait list in June, July, August, very late August even. And some of those were very selective colleges. I think Duke was one that did it like very, very late in the cycle. Now, a lot of students, if you're on a wait list for Duke, for example, you're already committed to another school. You've probably gone through orientation, gotten your dorm, even selected your classes. And then all of a sudden, Duke at the end of August says, hey, by the way, would you like to come? We have a spot. Chances are, if Duke was on your list and you accepted the waitlist offer, you're probably going to contemplate doing that. And if you did take the offer for Duke, the school that you left, which is perfectly fine for you to do, is probably going to just have an empty spot, because a lot of other schools are going to have a harder time filling that waitlist spot that late in the year. So again, this is not something that, unlike deferral, where you're still kind of in the running, waitlist is kind of saying you're not really in the running, but you might be later on down the road. And I'd like to say this just a little bit, like, I don't like to have students get their hopes up about waitlisting, but I feel like just based on the last year, you might be able to get it up just a tiny bit more than I would say you normally should because there was a more and more waitlisting action. I don't know if Tom agrees with that or not, but that's what I saw last season. Um, okay, so next slide. And the last one is denial. So, I've already had some students who were denied. They applied early decision and they weren't deferred, they were just denied. So if you are denied, you're done for at least for that cycle. Now, you could appeal. There are circumstances and reasons that somebody might appeal their decision. It's very, very rare that a student is going to get admitted on an appeal, but you are able to do that. And sometimes the colleges will even give you instructions on how to do that if they allow that sort of thing. But it is very common for a student to feel down about this because especially if they've applied early decision, that's your number one choice, right? So you're getting denied early in the process from your number one choice. But, take a couple days to feel bad about it and then try to move on because hopefully if you've created a really good list, you have a lot of other great options there and you are going to get into a school that's going to be a good fit for you in the end. So, have your moment, feel sad, but know that you're going to land where you're supposed to land. And maybe in the end, it's going to end up even better than what would have happened if you would have gotten into this school. So try to think. I personally believe that everything happens for a reason. And I've seen it over my 30 plus year career that students were really bummed out in the beginning, but they end up being really happy down the road. So try to keep that glimmer in your mind if you were denied. I think, Tom, you're up to talk about, I forget what.
Letters of
Letters of
continued
continued.
interest. Yes.
There you go.
I'm just going to go ahead and click. Hopefully my screen share still works. But I'm just going to go ahead and share, and Diana will share this in the chat as well. Oh, it looks all like freezy glitchy, but just going to let things stabilize. So if you do end up getting deferred or waitlisted from a college, one of the first things that you should do is close out of the pop-ups on the window that you click on. One of the first things that you should do is look at the actual notification from the college, which will be usually you'll get an email update saying like, hey, you have a new decision on your application portal. You'll log into your application portal with a username and password that the college usually sends to you. And then you'll get your admission decision there. If you get accepted, great. You can read the instructions and directions on what that means in terms of potentially sending a deposit. But if you do end up getting deferred, you'll want to pay attention to the language in the actual decision around what they want to receive from you. Some colleges are like, no, we don't want to receive any information, or they say, we don't want to receive it via email. We want you to upload it at this link at our application portal. So it's really important to pay attention to the directions that colleges give you. But generally, the type of information that they want to hear is what we're going to cover right now in what's called a letter of continued interest. That's kind of like a general catch-all term that counselors use to describe these types of communications to colleges if you have been deferred or waitlisted from one. Essentially, what these are just an update to colleges on what may not have been included in your application at the time that you applied that you want to point their attention to. There's lots of different ways that you can go about writing this letter. I would not say that there isn't, word for word, you need to have 100 words about this and 50 words about that. Every student's letter of continued interest is going to look a little bit different. There are a few general things, though, that you do want to try to think about covering in the letter. And again, the blog guide kind of runs through a lot of those, general tips. But generally, you want to reaffirm your interest in the school, how it's still a school that you would be really interested in attending. If since applying, you have done virtual tours or information sessions, or you had a conversation with a current student at that college, or you learned any new information that made you more excited about it, that's often good to mention in these types of communications, just to let them know it's still on your radar. You have a deeper understanding of the school, maybe even than when you initially applied, and reaffirm your interest in attending if you were to be admitted. Other things to kind of mention in these letters are any academic highlights or updates, right? So say, after kind of that introductory paragraph or so where you let the school know, why you're still interested in them. What are some things about it that really stand out to you that make you really excited about potentially attending? Then transitioning to some of the things that you have accomplished so far as a senior in high school that maybe weren't included as much in your application because they were in progress, right? All the grades in your classes that you have been actively engaged with in your fall semester or trimester, those are all things to point to and draw attention to the admission officer, right? Because they won't necessarily have had updates from you about your academic progress. It doesn't just have to be, I got straight A's, right? Oftentimes colleges will actually ask for a mid-year report, which includes your mid-year grades. And they'll look at those oftentimes when they're reevaluating your candidacy before you get a final decision, usually around mid-March for most schools, if you're deferred to regular decision. So they'll have those grades, but what are some maybe like projects that you worked on in certain classes that were really exciting to you? Was there a class this year that was your favorite? Maybe there's one that relates to your major and you're like, oh, I'm making such great strides in quantum physics. That's probably a little bit too advanced for you. But then again, we work with students who really do knock it out of the park with STEM. So not that uncommon, but pretty uncommon. Whatever kind of the point of pride or the light bulb moment or something that really inspired your intellectual curiosity, that's one of those admission nutrients that we've talked a lot about at College SAI the past couple of months. Those are all great things to mention in these letters. Then you can also move on to some points of extracurricular pride. Have you been working on a big fundraiser that you were in go, go, go mode all throughout the fall semester while you were applying to college, and now you finally have a grand total of money that you raised? Or is there anything that you can point to? Maybe you're an athlete and you had a really terrific season on your sport, or you had a really lousy season and you can talk about, hey, we never won any games, but here are all the things that I got out of this season in terms of my camaraderie with my team. We had a great time picking what place to go to for our post-game cry commiseration. We rotated between Uno to trying to think of any like other fast casual kids. It doesn't have to be like all that deep or serious, but you just want to kind of give that admission officer a little bit of a life update, essentially. And if you can point to quantifiable points of pride, or you reach more students through your tutoring program, or you are really proud of this article that you published in the school newspaper because it really helped shed light on a really important issue to you, those are all fair game to include in these types of communications, especially if they haven't been included in your application already. All right, so I'm going to read through a sample letter just to give you a little bit of a sense of how all these pieces might kind of come together for a hypothetical student. Dear Miss Veronica Lauren, I'm going to zoom in a little bit for you. My name is Zola Avery, and I'm a hopeful Yalie from Bergen County, New Jersey. Though deferred from the early action pool, I remain absolutely convinced that Yale is the school for me. I'd like to thank the admission department for reevaluating my materials. So yeah, fairly straightforward. You get right into the point there and you reaffirm your continued interest. This student may decide that they want to kind of, you may decide that you want to share a little bit more of those personal anecdotes or things about the individual school, like I mentioned before, but it's also okay to kind of be this direct too, especially since Yale had a lot of like why us related questions. So the college would already know that. Then the student goes on. This past weekend, I got the opportunity to spend some time up in New Haven for the Yale University Model United Nations Conference, serving as part of the United Nations International Strategy for Disaster Reduction Committee. That is quite the mouthful and a lot of acronyms. And debating rising sea levels and volcanic eruptions. Speaking with current Yale students made me realize more than ever before that I was with my people, warm, incredibly funny, artistic in their own way, and unabashedly inquisitive. This weekend, I was where I belong. So actually, spoiler, the student did end up kind of going into this more Yale-specific experience. It happened to be related to something that's on their more extracurricular end. That's not always going to be the case for all of you with many of the schools on your list, but this was a really nice touch to the student's letter to include, especially since it wasn't in her application when she applied early. I would also like to take this time to briefly tell the admission department about a few things that have happened since I submitted my early action application. First, I wrote, illustrated, and published a children's book centered around gender inclusivity in STEM fields, with all the proceeds going towards supporting curriculum development and outreach for the Stereotype Project, an organization I've been running for the past 4 years that focuses on combating stereotypes through art. So we're getting a nice update about a point of pride and an accomplishment that was probably a work in progress by the time the student applied, but now they actually had something to show for it. I've attached PDF copies of my book, Mika and the Microscope, very cute name, along with some other information, but you should be receiving a copy in the mail soon. I very much believe the magic of reading is magnified when the book is in its physical form. And I think my brother and sister, 5 and 9, would definitely agree. I really like this last sentence because it's not just here are all the things that I've done, right? Just as with your supplemental essays for colleges, at College Essay Guy, we talk a lot about the power of insights, right? So it's those so what moments. It's not just a rattling of a list of I did this and then I did this and then I did this and I'm going to move on to the next paragraph. You want to usually conclude whatever information you've shared with some kind of insight sentence about what it communicates about your values, something that why you wanted to kind of go about this project to begin with, a realization you had as you were kind of finalizing whatever work this was. So kind of leaving with some kind of reflective response is usually going to be something that lands really well on the reader's end. She also includes a few updates in this succinct, straightforward way, like these kind of bullets here. Secondly, I'd like to add the following honors to my admission file. So she just kind of lists these out as bullets and doesn't really feel the need to kind of go at length with these because you generally want these to be a few paragraphs. I would say, when you start to get over 600 words or so, kind of like a Common App essay, that's probably a sign that it's getting a little bit too long. And now she says, my whole life I have worked to draw connections and bridge the gap between science, social justice, and art. Whether wandering through the Yale Art Museum, bridging together feuding nations as part of the Yale Model UN, or listening to Dr. Woo Young An speak about causal learning and the relationship between genetic explanations and psychopathology, I know that no community will help me flourish quite like Yale's would. I know that there's nowhere I'd rather create the future. Again, thank you for taking the time to reevaluate my application. Please let me know if there's anything else I can provide. So these details above, Yale has pretty short why us questions. So it's very likely that there were additional reasons beyond what you actually had room to share in your application that you can touch and fold into this response. And it will help distinguish you from other candidates who aren't necessarily going the extra mile to show their continued interest and their deep knowledge of what Yale has to offer, or insert whatever school that you're applying to and maybe got deferred from. And then you just sign it off as a typical email. So hopefully this gives you a better sense of the type of content that you want to include. Again, they're not one size fits all, but this resource is there for you going forward. But first and foremost, listen to the college and what they request of you. All right, back to the regular scheduled programming with our lovely slides.
Okay, I think it's my turn here. Okay, so we are going to talk a little bit about some optional application components. And there is a new thing. Well, I don't think it's very new, actually, but I think it's been kind of rebranded, or, it's been adopted by many colleges at this point. But these are little video clips, video responses. And we have 6 schools here that we're showing that take this, but actually it's grown a lot. I believe there's like over 100 colleges that are affiliated with this company called Glimpse. And you may have already seen this as if you're seniors, but if you're juniors and you're listening, you'll run into this later. It is something that's optional for sure, but it is something that I think can really help. If you look at the next slide, go to the next slide. Oh, okay. I guess it's 2 slides up. We were going to play this video for you. It was 2 students kind of discussing their Glimpse video. But we can't get the audio to play. So you're going to be able to look at this on your own. But what is a glimpse video? It is basically what the title sounds like. It's a glimpse into your life, very short, 90 seconds. And it's just something additional that the colleges are looking at these days to kind of add another piece of information for them and kind of put your face with your personality and the things that they're reading about you. And it's just a way that you could possibly stand out in the process. This is not going to be, something at the top of the common data set. If you maybe don't know what that is, but it's a place where you can look up what the importance of each different component of the application is for each school. So a lot of times you're going to see that, your rigor of courses, the grades that you earned in those classes. Sometimes you'll see essays and things that are very important. I don't believe a glimpse video is going to be in the very important category. It's not going to move the dial for you. You're definitely going to get in if you send a great 90-second video, but it could help give a little bit more flavor and bring life to your application, I guess I would say. So if you look at the next slide, I believe this is the one that I wanted to Yes. Okay. So this was we go to this conference every year called NACAC. It's the National Association of College Admissions Counselors, and it's in a different city every year. And this past year, it was in Columbus, and I actually went to this session. I was just like, oh, I want to learn a little bit more about Glimpse and what it's all about. And it was run by admissions officers from Middlebury and Vanderbilt, and they were raving about it. And we don't have these exact examples, but they showed all kinds of video examples. And one of the things I really loved, I can't remember which admissions officer said this, but he said, when we are reviewing an application, we play the Glimpse video in the corner and just let it play while we're reviewing. So as they're reading the things that you're saying, they actually see you talking. And I just think it's really cool. They love it. And it's just, again, it adds a little bit of life to the application. And that says it right here, insights from the AOs, it puts a face and personality. It's not really going to hurt. It's okay to repeat things that are in your application if you want to, because it adds tone, emotion, and context. You don't need to do anything like a big production. It can just be you walking around with your iPhone. In fact, I was thinking, if I was going to do a Glimpse video, what would I do? And I'm here in Colorado visiting family. I would probably just do a 90-second video of like, this is what my family and I do when we hang out, and we're working a 750 or 750 piece puzzle. So I might say, this is how we sort it out, and this is how we start. And just really, you're just like hearing me talk, and you see something that I do. And I've seen examples. One of the ones that they showed at the conference was a student who was walking around her kitchen, and she was showing, her family's favorite foods, and how she makes them, and some of the favorite spices that so it's 90 seconds is very quick. All right. But you want to just talk like a regular person, be natural and relaxed. And it doesn't need to be scripted, because the more scripted it is, the more you're going to be nervous. If you're just kind of walking around like, hey guys, this is, I just want to show you this thing that I do. It's kind of fun. So I think just make sure you're talking about yourself. You don't want to say anything really about the college, because the one thing about Glimpse is when you upload it, you can send it to any college that's on their list, but you really can send it. I learned that at this conference, that you can send it to really any college in the country, even if they're not on their list, and they'll accept it. So just know that it would be a little extra thing to add if you have time to do it. And I think it's fun. So, even though the application process itself is not always fun, this is something that you could have a lot of fun with. And if you're having fun, it's going to come across in that way to the admissions officers, which is probably going to, help them see you in a different light. So I don't know if there's another slide on this, but I think, oh, this last slide is, again, we can't play the video, but this is an example of a student's video. Actually, when you hit play, I heard sound come through.
Yeah, I just don't think the quality will be very good because it's not
Okay.
the computer.
Okay.
So.
All right. So yeah, you can watch it on your own. But again, the 90 seconds, they're meant to be a glimpse into your life. They're accepted by 100 plus, but I've learned that you can share them anywhere. There's all kinds of sample videos. And if a college is saying that an optional piece is Glimpse or a video, they usually have some examples on there. And then on the Glimpse website itself, they have a list of like potential topics of just examples of things that you can do just to make a quick video. So I believe that's it about Glimpse, and that you are going to take it over for other supplements.
Oops, I accidentally clicked on. Just so you know, this is a link to the Glimpse website where they have a more detailed list of potential topics that you could make your video about. And as you can see, like Renee was saying, it really kind of runs a range of things that you can include here. It's pretty wide ranging. So it could just be something that you didn't really get a chance to cover as much in your application, but maybe want to shed a little more light on. Okay, so another optional opportunity that you may see for some of the schools on your list, and you may want to look into if this applies to you, are portfolios and supplemental opportunities. So I know, for example, MIT, they have their, there's like a maker portfolio that they have students, I offer to students to complete. Some schools will ask this to be completed on the regular by the regular decision deadline. Sometimes they will give you like a grace period and let you send this in afterward. But it is something worth looking into because sometimes not every student knows that this is an option. But if you're a student who is really talented in music, drama, visual arts, maybe you've done some high level research, you can check and see with individual colleges if they'll allow you to submit an optional portfolio. Or a supplement is sometimes what they will call them. It's a little confusing because there's supplemental essays, and then people will call these like art supplements or application supplements where you're sending in like images and videos of you playing the tuba or dancing your lyrical solo, right? Whatever you end up sending in, yeah, this is not a guaranteed opportunity from college to college, but it's definitely something that can help you stand out. I will say from experience at Pomona, students who were admissible, just academically, were the bulk of the application pool, right? Because it's a highly selective college. Usually, when a school is that selective, they're not strapped for academically strong students. They have a lot of students to choose from. So that's when they're going to look to other important priorities for them. And we would have things like, ratings from orchestra directors and directors of certain other uh, ensembles on campus that would let us know, hey, we really need a soprano for the glee club. And this student's, submission tape basically was really strong. And she wasn't even planning on majoring in music. It's just something she wanted to do as an extracurricular. So definitely something to look into and consider if this applies to you. There are also some colleges that will have like optional short essay responses that are not required at the time of application, but sometimes you're invited to send these in after you've already applied, and you can upload them at a later date than the actual Common App, regular submission deadline for your general application on their application portal, which Renee is going to talk about in a second. One of the schools, for example, that does this, and I believe they're still doing this, is Holy Cross, which is where I went to college. It's a small, selective liberal arts college in Massachusetts. And I remember when I was a college counselor in a high school, I had a student who Holy Cross was on her list, and I let her know, I was like, hey, for you, Holy Cross is more of like a likely school, maybe a target school. If you make sure to demonstrate interest, they're going to send you this thing called a Holy Cross response, which is a short optional supplemental essay to talk about how you've gotten to know about the school, why you're interested in attending. And you'll have to do that in the portal after you apply. She didn't end up doing it, and she got waitlisted, which the family was shocked about. And I was not shocked about because I was like, I gave you actually many warnings about this. Especially when colleges offer these types of optional opportunities, things like glimpse videos. Again, they're not requirements by any means, but if the early bird does get the worm, the student who kind of is looking at the opportunities that are available. If you're really interested in that school, especially if they're responses that you can send in after your big main regular decision deadline, take a few days to breathe, and kind of send out a release from putting together all of those required application components, and then spend a little bit of time on each individual school's portal and look and see, are there things I can do? I think University of Richmond, I want to say, is another one that for the past couple of years, I haven't checked for this cycle, have given students optional responses to send in to affirm their interest in the school. These are all things that are really going to be ones you don't want to just like let slip away, especially when you usually do have a little bit more time to focus on them if they're a post-application opportunity.
Okay. So let me talk to you a little bit about the applicant portal. I worked in schools for a really long time, and I think this is one of the mistakes that students make, not their fault because they may not have known about this, but for every college that you apply to, you should be receiving an email within 1 to 2 days with information. It'll give you like a temporary login and password, and then you need to go in and create your account. And this is the place that you want to be checking. You don't need to check it every day, but I would check it periodically, and I would check it at the very beginning. When you first get the email, you need to go ahead and set that account up. And the reason for that is if there's anything missing whatsoever, it's going to be listed in that portal. And there are sometimes you get these like I call them like a sneak attack essay, like, it says right here, an optional essay component. There could be some other things that they need. For example, some students have to fill out STARS, which is a self-reported academic record. You could have done that prior to submitting, but sometimes students don't know about it until after they submit. And the other thing that I knew as a counselor is that even if as a counselor, I sent in all the materials for a student, every once in a while, there could be a glitch. If your school's on Naviance or Score, or even with the Common App, where somehow that one piece, that one document is lost. And the college is saying, we never received it. Your counselor would have a record that they sent it, so they're not going to penalize you, but at least you see that it's missing. You can immediately alert your counselor and say, hey, something is missing, and they would contact admissions and straighten it out. So you definitely want to make sure you're doing that. The other thing is if you don't see an email with the portal information within 2 days, I would go ahead and contact the college or ask your counselor for help on this, because it could be going into spam. And this last bullet point that says, please do not use a school email. I actually have I guess it's somewhat of a horror story from a student who used his school email. He applied to, I don't know how many schools, never got any responses, even though I, as the counselor, told them you're going to get an email, you're going to need to create your applicant portal. He came in a month or two later and said, I never got an email from any of my schools. And I was like, what? And we figured, let's go check into this. And I realized he used the school email. A lot of schools have a firewall. So when the schools are sending information about the portal and all this other information, the student didn't get any of them. And what happened with one of his schools is that he ended up getting rolled into the regular decision pool because he missed a lot of things that were required for early action. And it was all because there was a firewall. So he had to contact every single college and have his email changed to his personal email, which took quite a lot of time. I was even trying to help, and it was very difficult because the admissions people had to go in and try to figure out how to change the email. And so don't do that. Please use your regular email and not your school email. Hopefully you've already done that and you haven't made this mistake. But if you are not receiving emails, go to your counselor and try to get some help there, or contact admissions. Okay, next slide. So as I said, the next steps are going to be located in the portal. Anything missing will be listed there. The one thing I will say is if you just submitted let's say your RD app for the first time and you log into the portal and it says everything's missing, give it a week or so, because sometimes it takes a while for the admissions office to gather all the information and upload it into the portal. So it's not like 24 hours and everything should be listed there. You got to give it a few minutes and before you start panicking and going to your counselor. But if it's like 2 weeks and it shows nothing is there and you can see that your counselor uploaded the materials, then there may be a problem and you're welcome to reach out. And there are some additional opportunities that might only be available in the student portal. And this is also the place where you're going to find out whether you were admitted or not, or deferred, waitlisted, et cetera. So you want to check it, but again, you don't need to be checking it every day. I would check it periodically. And if you are on the email list for the college, they usually give you a heads up as well, if when they're going to release the decision, but they're going to ask you to log into the portal to get the decision. So it's a really important step that I think some students may miss. And if you're anything like the students I work with or my own child, your inbox is probably flooded with emails that you never read. So make sure you're paying attention and looking for these specifically for the schools that you applied to. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Renee. So
Yes.
I just wanted to close out. There's still definitely add in your questions. But I just wanted to let you all know about a opportunity in case you are working on applications for regular decision institutions, and you'd like someone to take a look over all of your materials. We actually do offer the service called Complete Application Review. Kind of wish it was actually included on the screenshot, but it's not. Diana is going to include a link in the chat to that service. And essentially what happens with this is you're able to send in we'll send you at College Essay Guy a blank Google Doc template where you paste in your Common App essay, your activities list, your additional information section, and supplemental essays for either 1, 2, or 3 colleges. There is an option to purchase more. If you contact our team via email, we can send a custom invoice, but usually those are the kind of 3 standard packages that we offer just to keep things a little more simple. And a lot of times you can, recycle and recalibrate essays from school to school. So you can choose 3 strategically and take the notes and apply them to other schools that have similar essays. That's my money-saving tip to you for the day. I am actually on this review team. I help manage the team of reviewers who review through files. Many of them are coaches who work with our students one-on-one at College Essay Guy. Many of us on the team, in addition to webinars like this, we work with students one-on-one, guiding them through brainstorming, essay writing, and we leverage a lot of the tools and resources and activities that Ethan uses on courses. So it's a really similar CEG language if you're used to kind of, vulnerability and insights and the language that we often use with students, pushing for specificity. It's a really similar kind of lens as to what Ethan might do on a live course review, for example, or what I might do. And all of the comments and feedback is completely asynchronous. You upload them all into a blank document. And once you send that into our team, after you send it into us, you'll get feedback within 4 business days. So that's, Monday through Friday, not including holidays or weekends. We'll send you an email back with a video summary from your reviewer, moving through all of your materials, pointing out some, things that are going really well with the essays, things that you might want to improve, specific direct line items for feedback. So it's a really deep dive, great service, especially if you want just reassurance and confirmation that what you've already been working on is on the right track. And the earlier you send it in, obviously the better, because it does take 4 business days, and we don't want you to be sending in things like right before your deadline, because you may get a lot more feedback than you were expecting. You can indicate like basically how interested in feedback you are at the top, if you're like really maxed out, if you're up for, really a lot of pivoting and different changes. So this is a great way to kind of get more last minute application support from our team, especially because the one-on-one program where you meet with a coach and you talk with them on Zoom and go through all the parts of the process is a little bit late. It's a little bit late in the timeline, but you can definitely still sign up. And if you're interested in one-on-one, we do offer hourly packages for students who are coming towards this later end of the application season. So Diana will also send in the link for the one-on-one chat, or sorry, the one-on-one essay program. If you are interested in receiving some support to reduce the costs of the complete application review service, we are offering a $100 off coupon. Yay! Holiday cheer. This is my favorite holiday song, is saving $100. So if you use the coupon code CAR100, CAR is complete application review. We're not offering free cars. That's a little ambitious. That's Oprah's gig. I don't know if it still is, but it used to be. But this is a great way to kind of reduce the cost of this service if you're interested in it. And yeah, Diana will send information in the chat. If you have follow-up questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But we have about 10 more minutes. So Renee, I don't know if there's any questions or things that are coming in the Q&A that you want to touch on that we can dive into.
Yeah, I've been filling or responding online. But there is, let's see. Oh, this is a good one. Somebody asked the question, how do you know whether or not to provide mid-year reports for a college? That's a really good question. So for most of you, I'm assuming most of you, besides the UC app, are using the Common App for most of your college applications. On the main page of your Common App, like the information page, I'm sorry, the main page of the college on the Common App, there's an information page, and right on that page, it'll tell you what they require. So it'll say, counselor letter of recommendation, mid-year report, final report, et cetera. So that's one place you can check. The other would be on the college's website. And then you probably need to let your counselor know that your school may have their own policies and procedures on how they do that. But you normally would want to let your counselor know, hey, I'm going to need a mid-year report for a blank school. And then the counselor will send it once the grades are in and they're final. There are schools that allow you to upload your mid-year grades to the portal as well. But you have to check this for each school. And a lot of times it'll actually say in the portal, mid-year grades are missing. And so you'll know that you need to send them in. But you can be proactive and maybe make a list instead of being, getting letters and notices, oh, we need your mid-year grades, you haven't sent them in. I would probably be proactive to try to find out. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Tom? No? Okay. Let's see here. I am answering a question here. I'll just answer it live since we have time. One of the questions was, if you opt to not complete the CSS profile, Does that have any effect on admissions decisions or just potential aid? And that's a really good question as well. The CSS profile is not going to have any effect on your admissions decision. It's only going to affect whether or not you can receive any need-based aid. It also, I mean, it could possibly affect merit aid, but it's mostly going to be a need-based aid application. So if you and your family choose not to fill out FAFSA or CSS profile, that should have no bearing on your admissions decision. So I'm going to say that we've done that one. Let's see. What other
There's
ones
a
are in?
decent amount of questions, like one, for example, that just came in that I typed up a response to, but I'll just point attention to it is, if your school will send in your 12th grade results, do you still have to report them yourself? Um, I'm not sure if this is referring to, if you need to send in yourself like an unofficial transcript, but usually colleges want something officially sent in from your high school. Um, for questions like that, it's really something that Renee and I aren't going to be able to really give you all a one size fits all answer, because every college does this differently. But for the most part, every high school has their own policy around sending in transcripts. They have certain dates that you need to request it by. There's a certain person that you need to contact. So we can give, our guidance is basically to contact your school officials, because every high school that you all are tuning in from or attending is going to approach that transcript submission process to colleges a little bit differently. So Nancy's asking, I love this question. I also dance and perform Greek folklore with full costume in different venues. I would love to see that. And I've been eating decent amount of Greek food lately. So I'm liking this comment. Should I add that even if it is a music supplement video or too much? So usually for if a college offers like a supplemental arts portfolio where they will invite you to send in, dance submissions, music submissions, they usually will give pretty clear instructions on the types of things that they're looking for. They will let you know if they accept all types of dance from, a wide range of cultures and traditions, or maybe they're like, we want to see ballet, tap, and lyrical, because that's what our dance program is mostly focused on. So you just want to pay attention to the instructions. If these opportunities are available, they may not be. I'd say they're more common at more colleges that have more of like a liberal arts approach. Maybe not as much of like these big state schools or places like USC where they have their own individual dance and music departments, and everyone who is involved in those or who's in the ensemble, so they don't really need to recruit students for dance ensembles or music ensembles. But yeah, individual schools on your list might have a little bit more information on their website about this.
Let me see what other ones are in here. Just signed into the deaf. Okay. Here's a question. It says, if I get admitted in restrictive early action, do I need to reply or send any message to the university now? So that's a really good question as well. Restrictive early action is not binding. So you have until May 1 to make that decision for that school. So you don't have to reply to them if you get admitted, and you don't have to withdraw your other apps. The only restriction was on the way that you were allowed to apply to other schools. So you weren't allowed to apply, depending on the school. There's like 7 schools that have a restrictive early action. They all vary a little bit in their rules, but mainly the rule is that you can't apply early decision to you can't apply binding to another school if you're applying restrictive early action. So once you receive your decision, if you're admitted, you could treat that just like any of the other early action rolling or regular decision admits, and find out where you get in and then make your decision later in the process. But that was a really good question. Let's see. Any other questions?
Leia's just asking, how do I get started on Glimpse videos, especially for an ED or EA school? I would just take a look at the Glimpse website. They have a pretty straightforward instructions on what are the supporting institutions that accept them. I would say if you're an early action or early decision candidate to a school, they're probably close to wrapping up their admission decisions at this point. So I don't think they're probably going to really influence your process quite as much, and or the deadline for submitting them may have passed. But definitely for regular decision schools on your list, it's a great thing to look into, because if it is offered and available to some schools on your list, yeah, AOs are pretty uniform in saying that it's very, very rare that these videos will ever hurt a student, as rather than helping them. Even if you feel like it's super cringy and you don't like what you did, usually the adults in the room are a lot more forgiving than you are in terms of judging yourself. I had to learn that lesson and practice what I preached when I was first started making YouTube videos for College Essay Guy. I was like so self-conscious about doing it, and now I just get up there and say what I have to say, and it feels very liberating. Um, let's see. I know we're close to time, so I wasn't sure if there's any final ones to get into. Um, if I already finished my interview, do I still need to submit the optional video? So some colleges offer interviews. That is another. We didn't really touch on that in this session as much, because interviews are kind of actually scaling back at a lot of different colleges. There are a lot of time, resources, money to put on. Well, actually, not really usually as much money because alums often volunteer to do it. But a lot of schools have scaled back interviews just because of the how much of a production they are to put on. Um, but if a school does offer interviews as an optional opportunity, that you can opt into, definitely recommend taking advantage of it. Some schools will invite you to interview. And sometimes people worry, if I didn't get an invitation, doesn't mean that I'm not getting in. Not necessarily. Sometimes there's really not as much of a clear rhyme or reason as to why certain students are invited to interview. Sometimes it just has to do with alumni availability, or, you know, people who are close to you if it's an in-person interview, and they might just not offer you one. I know this was the case at Pomona if you're in a state where they just don't have anyone available. Um, so yeah, just like any of the optional opportunities that we discussed, great to look into interviews. And if you did an interview and a college still lets you do something like Glimpse and you're really interested in the school and it's easy for you to send it in, there's definitely no issue with kind of taking advantage of both opportunities if they're available there. Uh, um, and then maybe the last question here, that's a pretty simple one. Um, do you help students working on deferred decision for specific schools? And should I wait for the SAT score, then submit a letter of continued interest at the same time? Um, Submitting letters of continued interest, first, you want to follow whatever directions or instructions the college provides to you if they share anything. If they don't really provide as much information or they want it by a certain date, a generally good date to submit it by is going to be, I'd say, if you're a deferred student, you probably want to send in some type of communication to a college if they accept it, by January or February. I'd say late January, early February is a perfectly acceptable time to send in that letter of continued interest. You don't need to rush and send it in while you're trying to complete your regular decision applications. Those are applications that you still need to work hard on. You want to prioritize those first and foremost because you already received the decision from your early school. They're not twiddling their thumbs and waiting for your letter. They're focusing on the regular decision process, but you do want to make sure it's in early enough so that way it's taken into account by when they release admission decisions in mid-March. So you want them to actually have it as something that they can discuss and reevaluate as part of your candidacy. So the question about whether or not to submit your SAT score or wait for your SAT score or not, I wouldn't really worry about your SAT score as much. You can also always send in an updated SAT score email, and it can just be really short and sweet whenever you do get those results. So totally fine if you want to end up sending another communication after the letter or wait. It's up to you if the timing works out. And then do you help deferred students on specific schools? We don't really have a formal program for working with students who are deferred. You can reach out to our program advising team by submitting the one-on-one services request, and let them know in your email message that you may be interested in some college counseling. I know in the past they've done some really hourly support with students, but our services are kind of always evolving, so that may not be something that's like a formal offering right now. But we definitely do continue to do webinars and sessions like this to help you out too. All right. I hope that you all got some quality information from this. And Renee, thank you so much for joining me and for
Thank you for having me.
some parting wisdom. So I don't know if there's anything you want to say in our last minute or so.
Oh, I mean, just I say to everybody, I know that by reading the questions, you guys are really involved in in this process, and it can be anxious, but keep the faith. Everything's going to work out. You're going to find a great school. You're going to pick your school, and you're going to be happy. So I believe that anyway.
I love the positivity. And my parting words is really just answering another question. Um, Someone was asking, could you post the link to the past live events page? And I just posted it in the chat for everyone. So it's just our webinars and live events webpage. Feel free to bookmark it, save it, whatever you'd like to do. But my parting words are to keep showing up to sessions like this, to allow us at College SAI to be a vetted resource for you. We're really proud of this team that we have that are really know their stuff, who have worked in schools for a really long time, like Renee. Not that long, she's not that old, but long enough to know what she's talking about. And people like me who've worked in college admissions, and sharing kind of the inside knowledge that we have from our various roles and backgrounds, and sharing that out with all of you is really why we do the work that we do. So please continue to look to us for support, whether it's another webinar or a complete application review or whatever it may be. And we hope to see you on the next one. Best of luck with all of your applications, everyone. Had
Yeah,
happy
thank you. Bye. Happy holidays.